Hello, my name is Roman Dzindikhashvili, and this is lecture number 4 on Bobby Fischer as one of maybe the best player in the history of the game. So what makes him the best player ever? At least most talented, because he was playing throughout his career without help of any computer engine. So we are counting here not the actual strength, but the talent. When I looked at Bobby Fischer's games, and also games of some absolutely top chess players in the world, I went move by move, and I came to conclusion that there is no move that I couldn't make. I could make every move he made. And I'm sure there are hundreds or maybe thousands of players, when they look at the games of such a giants as Botvinnik, Petrosian, Smyslov, they think the same way. Why can I make all these moves, and why am I not on the top? The answer is very simple. Every move you wouldn't make, or every move. You understand every move. Understanding is not making them. And because along with the moves that were played by best players, there are other moves that make just as perfect sense. And if players are not on the top, then what you would do is you will have, imagine yourself having a test, and you have multiple choices on 50 questions. And there are multiple choices, like 3 or 4. And you have to be right every time. Imagine what the odds to that. But for a player like Fischer, who played like an absolute machine computer, he could make every one of them. That's what made him the greatest player that ever lived. Okay, Fischer played with Spassky match in 1972. He didn't have any brilliant sacrifices, just unusual moves. He won whole match using the same technique. He would play different openings, but he would absolutely beat Spassky in preciseness. Some of the games were played in the end game that should have been a draw, but Spassky had to play all the perfect moves, and that didn't happen. The exception in that game in that match was game number 1. Game number 1, Fischer played very dubious move. He took the pawn and got his bishop trapped, and later on he had drawing chances, but he lost. Why did it happen? If he is a machine, if he can play like a calculator, why did he lose that game? The answer is very simple. You cannot play chess when you are emotionally unbalanced. Fischer was emotionally unbalanced because there was a big scandal and big fighting before the match, when it should be made, when it shouldn't. And actually fighting was, and arguments were not between Fischer and Spassky was worshipping Fischer. I know that because I spoke to him before the match, and I spoke to him way after the match. So first game Fischer lost. And then Fischer complained about noise in the audience. and he didn't want to come to the second game. He didn't show up for the second game, and he was forfeited. That affected Spassky very much. And let me tell you this story. So after Fischer got forfeited in the second game, Spassky went to Fischer and said that he really wants to accommodate Fischer and play in the auditorium in the room where audience is separated from the stage. And actually that was later, much later, many years later, when I was with Gata Kamsky as a trainer and a coach for World Championship matches in India, they used the same shield to separate audience from the stage. Well, Fischer decided to continue the match. Score is 2-0 Spassky's favor, and Spassky even wanted to play game number 2 over. He didn't want to take 3 points because he was very honorable person and chess player, unlike a lot of other Soviet grandmasters, and he wanted to turn it down, but Soviet government was involved in making decisions. For Soviet government, this match had a big political value, and they did not allow Spassky to decline the win, and they did not allow this petition. And there, since Spassky was accompanied by a whole bunch of supervisors, so-called, from Communist Party, from sports committee that was a big part of the Soviet government, they did not allow him. And as Spassky said, he told me later that he doesn't make any excuses. He would have probably lost the match anyway, but it affected him throughout the match, that it like some kind of a guilt conscious that he got point in such an important match for World Championship without making any moves on the board, especially when he was black. That affected Spassky, and I understand why it did, because that's the kind of person he was. So Fischer's strength was in absolutely impeccable execution of the plan, preciseness in incredible accuracy. So I want to show you one game that I liked particularly well. It's not, by far, Fischer doesn't consider it one of his best games ever. And the reason why, I understand, he does not consider it one of his best games because he played Larry Evans. And Larry Evans, American Grandmaster, did not play his best. Fischer was black in this game, and it was played in U.S. Championship in 1965. 1965, Fischer was already, if not the best, close to the best players in the world. Nevertheless, he played in U.S. Championship. And one remarkable thing I noticed in Fischer's career, that he was beating American players like with a score almost like, not in the beginning of his career, like in the middle of his chess career, he was beating them almost 100%. He won U.S. championship with a perfect score. And the reason is because their opening preparation wasn't on a high level, and because their positional understanding wasn't on the highest level. Bobby Fischer was absolutely unique person. This is the guy that didn't want to know anything on this planet that has nothing to do with chess. Of course, Bobby couldn't speak Russian at all. But when I met him, I had firsthand, I had to see myself that he can understand every Russian word, and he knew every Russian word if it had to do anything with chess terminology. That was absolutely remarkable to me. He could know a word for weakness, for better, worse, checkmate, double check, all these things he knew perfectly. His pronunciation wasn't the best, but pronunciation is not something you need when you try to understand some file. He was absolutely incredibly knowledgeable in that area. And he said that he was raised as a chess player and become as good as he was, reading chess publications from Russia. Namely, there was a magazine called 64. He was reading it, and he was reading comments on top Russian players since he was 9 years old, and he was understanding what they say. He was practically raised on Russian chess school. And as you know, in Russia, I know at least two things they have the best. Well, some people say three. I know that what they have the best is a Russian caviar and Russian chess school. Some people say also the girls, but we don't want to discuss that subject now. So this game that he played against Larry Evans, as again, Fischer was black, and it was played in 1965, was 𝐁𝐨𝐻𝐿, Indian, knight c3, bishop b4. Now, you have to notice that Fischer, throughout his career, was a 90% a fianchetto player. He would play g6 and bishop g7. He would play King's Indian or Grunfeld defense. But that will show you this game how flexible he was in choosing opening. e3, b6. So far, it's all the part of the theory. Knight g2, bishop a6, a3, bishop takes c3, knight takes c3, and d5. b3 was played, and now knight c6. Bishop e2. Now, the best move, according to theory here, is a4. Play bishop a3. But the main reason for a4 move is to, on dc, bc, and knight a5, to play knight b5. And that's the way to protect the c4 pawn. And if black goes c6, then knight a3. White maintains solid center. In the game, after knight c6, bishop e2 was played, castle, and now a4, for the same reason we just mentioned. dc, bishop a3 was played first, rook e8, and now b4. Well, in my opinion, bishop a3 was a mistake because the a3 square should be saved for white's knight in the variation bc, knight a5, knight b5, c6. That square should be reserved for the knight, which secures white's center. But after white played bishop a3 and rook e8, now white didn't want to take, understandably, on c4 because of knight a5 move, so b4 was played. After b4, knight e7, black already has good position. And after next move, which was castling, in the eyes of a strong player, this is already a lost position for white. What should have been done, b5 had to be played, and after bishop b7, castle. This way, white guaranteed to win the c4 pawn. However, Larry Evans didn't think it would make any difference, so he played a castle, and now knight e to d5, rook c1. So all white needs to do is to play b5. But they cannot play b5 anymore after c6, and therefore they cannot get their pawn back on c4 that easily. Bishop f3, and now b5. Now, black has very bad bishop on a6. But I don't think bishop on a3 is any better. Plus, black has protected pass pawn on c4 and extra pawn. In my opinion, black is winning. And interesting to see the way Fischer won this game. This was fascinating. He played with very, very good understanding of positional play. He didn't keep his extra pawn for too long. a5, queen c7. Fischer did not like to play any chess games when he had piece like bishop on a6. So he thought it was wrong, and that's exactly one of the main principles of Soviet school. They said, do not have bishops like pawns. Do not have any of your piece extremely passive and dead for life and blocked for life. So after queen c7, queen c2, rook a d8, first immobilizes all his pieces, rook f d1, and bishop b7. Now it's obvious that it's a matter of time when black plays c5. He has intention to convert, to redeem his material advantage into positional. Bishop b7, rook d2, knight takes c3, queen takes c3, and there it is, c5. After c5, d takes c. There is no other move here, because if bishop takes on b7, there is in between c takes b, or even c takes d. And later black takes on b7 with extra pawn and winning position. Taking with the b pawn is absolutely horrible, because after bishop takes f3, gf, and knight d5, these pawns b5 and c4 is very powerful. There's many ways black can win this position. So that leaves only d takes c. Bishop takes f3, gf, rook takes d2. Now, this position after queen takes d2, rook d8, queen e1, and rook d3. You see what Fischer got in exchange for his extra pawn. What he got: complete domination on d-file. Absolutely terrible bishop on b2, as we will see now why. Fischer should totally unplug all the life support for that bishop. And terrible weakness on b4. You will see that also in a couple of moves. And compromised king's cover on the king's side. So after rook d3, it's very, very difficult for white to find the defense. Now bishop b2 was played, knight d5, bishop c3. And here is the process of completely turning this white star square bishop into a pawn. f6, completely blocking the activity of this bishop, and this bishop after e5 will be absolutely immobile. So it's like a bishop is hitting the wall. There's a wall of black pawn structure. Another very fine example of Russian chess school. And I went through Russian chess school from very beginning of my career to almost to the end. First, I had a very good entry-level coach that explained me the basics. Then I worked together with Anatoly Karpov and his coach, Semyon Furman. And then I went to Botvinnik school. So I had all the best training, but I wasn't Fischer. So, and here you will see that Fischer went through all this training also, but he didn't have these coaches. He used all the principles he could use. He was a tireless student, and he would read all that. And as I told you earlier, his chess terminology was impeccable in Russian. He would understand everything in Russian. And this is a good example. Bishop a1. Well, white cannot have only two pieces, queen on a1 and rook on c1. Keep busy with protecting the bishop on c3. So bishop a1 was played. e5. This is a very good move, as it's absolutely sealing the fate of bishop on a1, and also preparing possibly black's queen jumping to a king side. So after bishop a1, e5, king g2 was played, queen d7. Queen is going on d-file, preventing rook d1 because of knight f4 check, and also ready to go on king side. Queen d7, rook c2. And here, now, great positional understanding. And we know, I don't remember if Fischer ever missed any tactics. And there is the tactical part of it. e4, pawn, of course, cannot be taken because queen g4 check, followed by rook d1. So, for the same reason, f4 cannot be played. So Fischer played rook c1, e takes f, and now king h1. Taking on f3 will lead to absolute devastation after knight takes e3. Actually, this is an interesting picture. If you look without thinking about position, just look at the picture, look at white's pieces. Bishop on a1, rook on c1, queen on e1. And look at black's pieces. The pawn is untouchable because of rook takes e3, or even queen g2, followed by rook d2. And that's why pawn on f3 cannot be taken, king h1. But this already needs no commentaries. Now white has extra pawn, overwhelming positional advantage. White has extra pawn here, but if black has extra pawn here, but if black was 2 pawns down, it would have been just as winning. Now knight takes b4, taking will lead to immediate end after rook d1 check. After knight takes b4, queen g1. Now king f7, bishop d4, knight c6. Now it's prosaic, grinding, and game will be over in a very few moves. Queen g3, knight takes d4, pawn takes d4, rook takes d4. Well, this needs no further explanation. Rook g1, g5. White is absolutely and unconditionally lost. And for some reason, game went on for another 16, 17 moves that they present no interest of any kind. It seems like whole board is black here. Black is dominating everywhere. Now queen takes f3 will lead to exchange of queens, and the game is over with the 2 connected pass pawns. So game ended shortly after. In my opinion, this is a very simple game, but that's the clear indication of Fischer's strength. That's how he beat with a score 6-0, he beat Taimadov, he beat all the top players. We beat Larsen with 6-0. He beat all these giants of chess. So he was just as precise as we saw now. He was just as precise in absolutely complicated tactical positions. That's what he could do. Positional games, like he played now, some top Russian grandmasters could play also. But combination of tactics and positional play and preciseness with Fischer was on the highest imaginable level. That's why the result was such a good, and that's why he was the best player that ever lived. So I hope you learned something from this game and from commentaries, and I will see you very, very soon.